How do you turn your expertise into a clear and sellable offer that is a no-brainer for people to buy? That's what we're going to be looking at in this podcast today. So many people who have really powerful, really deep experience, expertise, maybe they've acquired it from working in industry and corporate, then they come to a point of going, do you know what? I could do this myself as a business. I've got all these skills, and maybe they're not valued, or the way you're working, you might be overworking, and you go, do you know what? I can have a much better life, a much better approach to this, get more freedom in my life, and I could become and build my own business, doing what I do in corporate, what I do in industry for other people. Maybe you've been solving complex problems in large organizations, and you think, wow, I could help smaller businesses do this. But then the crunch time comes and you launch your own business. And I want to save you from going on what is for many people a long journey to figure this out. So I'm going to map out what you need to do and what you need to work on to actually make all of that good stuff you've got, that experience, that knowledge, that know-how, and make it into a viable business. So first off, your wisdom, let's call it that, your wisdom, your expertise. Currently, when you exit your employer and you decide to start your own business, that knowledge isn't packaged. If you think about it, when you're in corporate, even though you've got all this experience, you're in a role. You're in a package. This is your role. This is your remit. This is where your authority lies. This is where your boundaries are. And then when you start your own business, all of those boundaries, those role definitions, your place in the hierarchy fall away. And now you've got this great big basket of expertise, and you've got to think about, how do I channel that? Well, now you're going to go from operating in a contained environment to operating in the open market. And so if you want to succeed in selling yourself and your expertise in an open market, you have to package it in a way that it's easy for people to see the value, and it's easy for them to make a decision to buy. And this is where many people transitioning from working for somebody else to going to actually building their business struggle. Now, in the first few months and even sometimes years of starting that expert business, you can ride off your contacts, people who've known you, who've had experience working with you. But once you get beyond those relationships and you have to go into the big wide world and actually get customers from complete strangers, that's where this becomes really important. So the first part is you've got all of this knowledge, you've got all of this expertise, and this is something that I struggled with. So point number one is wants, not needs. You have to find what the market wants, because that's what they'll pay for. They will pay for what they want. And I struggled with this for a long time because I knew that people were approaching things in the wrong way. And I was trying to sell them what they need. And unfortunately, there's no demand for what people need. There's only demand for what people want. So I have to look at my expertise. I have to look at my experience, my knowledge, my know-how, and I have to look at, what does the market want? Now, I might think that there's actually bigger issues than what they want, but if I try and sell something that people don't want, they won't pay for it, and I will have to sell harder or be better at selling. In other words, the ability of me as a marketer, the ability of me as a salesperson has to increase if I decide to sell to what the market needs. If I sell to what the market wants, there's already demand there, there's already motivation there, and I just have to package what I do to help them achieve what they want. So think about it like that. If I've got a market of people who say, I want X, and I say, hi, I've got a service that does X, that is easier than going, well, market, you want X, but really I know you need Y. So I'm going to market that you need Y and try and convince you to change your mind. There's a difference between selling what they need and selling what they want. And so you should package your knowledge and your expertise into something that the market wants right now, something that they are motivated to purchase. So what you have to do is look for, what do they want? They want solutions to problems. What are the problems in the marketplace right now that they want a solution to? That takes a bit of research, and you have to really dig and find out what are those problems that people want to solve. There are many problems that people could solve. There are many problems that people don't realize they need to solve. But if I want to have a viable business, I want to tap into problems people want to solve right now. They are motivated and desiring a solution. So I'm first of all looking at what problems and what outcomes do people want. And I will build my sellable offer around one problem, clearly defined problem, and one clearly defined measurable solution. The more vague and the more abstract I get with it, the less likely people are going to want it. So if I say I help you build confidence, confidence in what? Confidence for what? So think about it like, what is the end result, the change, the transformation that people desire, they want? And what's the problems they are living with? And there's no room in this stage, this work, for vagueness. There's no room for like ambiguity or weird fluffy words, or as I call nothing words. They don't mean anything. They're just fillers because you don't know what to say. Now, here's the real powerful thing. If I can find what the market wants, if the market wants to actually, I don't know, well, most coaches don't want clients but don't want to market. The pain of marketing and sales is high and they want clients. So for me, to help people, I tap into that and I build my offer around that. So to build a sellable offer, you need a problem that they face and you need a desire, a motivation of what they want. Those two things become powerful. That's what gets people to move. If they have basically a problem and a desired outcome. And you do not need millions of people for that. You need a small group of people you can identify that are motivated. And that might be a particular role. It might be a particular industry. Map it out. What's the problem you're going to solve? And what's the solution you're going to deliver? So it's a problem and it's an outcome, and they have to be specific. Without these, you have nothing. Very often, what happens is people sell a process and then they wonder why it's hard. People don't buy processes. Processes are proof. They are not going to sell it for you. So that's the first thing. Problem, specific problem you're going to solve, and a specific outcome you are going to deliver. Now, at this point, if I was having a conversation with you, some people say, yeah, but I can't define that outcome because it's not easy to define. Well, that tells me that you haven't fixed on one problem specifically, and it also tells me you haven't latched onto one particular audience. If you can't define an outcome, you don't understand your audience, or you haven't chosen an audience, and you haven't chosen a problem. Because the only reason you can't define an outcome, an end result, is because of those two are not clear. There's no other reason. Yeah, sometimes people go, yeah, but what if I can't guarantee people that outcome? Nothing is guaranteed in life. Yeah, nothing is guaranteed in life. But you go, well, hang on a minute. People want to be more confident public speakers. At the moment, their fear is they lose their lines. They're worried about it, but they want to become confident public speakers. Okay, what's the problem they got? What's the desired outcome? They want to be able to confidently deliver a compelling public speech and operate on stages without losing their lines, panicking, or getting stage fright. Fine, I've now got a problem and a solution. Yeah, I can define that. An audience who wants to be more public speakers, that might be CEOs. So you might have CEOs of growing tech companies. They know that it's really important to actually become more present as a public speaker, speak at events and all that kind of stuff, but they dread it. They know they need to do it. They want to do it, but they get sweaty palms. They forget their lines. They get nervous. They overthink it. There is a market, CEOs of growing tech companies. there's a problem, they're afraid of public speaking and they get nerves of public speaking, and they want to be on more stages, representing their brand, building their thought leadership. There is a problem. So there is something the market wants. Now I've got clarity on who I need to market to. I've got clarity on what the problem is, and that I've got clarity on the outcome. That builds my message. So this is all about building a sellable offer. Yeah, and a sellable offer comes from, what does the market want? What problems have they got? What will they pay for? They pay for the wants. Now we come to the next part, which is where everybody gets lost. What is your process to actually solve that? So that might be coaching. That might be an online course. That might be a book. It might be a consulting. You have a process to solve that. So think about that. What is that process? What is your process to actually solve it? Is it 5 steps? What are the 5 steps that they take to solve that problem working with you? Yeah. What are those 5 things or 4 things or whatever? Don't make 27 things, right? Few short steps to basically show that you solve that. Now, and this is where many people get stuck. Steps and process are not very exciting. People don't buy that, but they want to know what it is they're buying. So what does the money get me? That's what your steps are. But there's something else called milestones. So for every step that you do, every stage of the process, it will deliver a mini outcome. Many experts, and if you think about it, it's obvious, many experts think in processes. They think in processes. Why do we think in processes? Because we understand the power of process to make change. We understand that every transformation is a process. So we operate and sometimes we think in process. And that does not help us sell what we do. We need it because it's the back end of proving that we know what we're doing, gives people comfort that there is a journey in this and they can see how it makes sense, but it doesn't get them hooked on what you're going to do. So we as experts think in process. Our prospects, our ideal customers, think in events. I learned this lesson a long time ago. Events do not make long-lasting change. Events are a culmination of a process. So if you think about it, if I take you on a journey, at the end of it, there's a destination. Now think about that journey from problem to outcome. And there are 4 or 5 different milestones along the way, little wins along the way. Between each milestone, there is a process. So process number 1, optimize your profile. Okay, that's a process. We'll optimize the profile on LinkedIn, say. But what does that get you? What's the milestone of that? What does it achieve? How does it help you achieve a bigger goal? So we have steps or processes, the journey you're going to take people on, weekly coaching calls. We're going to optimize your profile. We're going to build your perfect audience. We're going to take your message. We'll build a system to actually get leads. Okay, great. We're going to do that. What are the mini outcomes of that? What are the mini milestones? In other words, I've achieved something, so that they can see that those milestones add up to the end result. See, many people think that if I say I'm a coach and I do amazing stuff, people will buy. But our process, our methodology, the way we do what we do is actually the proof. So in an offer that is easy to sell, that is easy to convert people, it's easy for people to say yes, you have problem, outcome, process, milestones. Milestones being the mini outcomes, mini achievements. And those mini achievements give people confidence that the gap between problem and outcome can be solved by you. I can see that if I achieve them, that outcome becomes possible for me. So those outcomes are very, very important, and they are achievements of your methodology or process. People won't buy a 12-week coaching program with you unless they can see how the 12 weeks add up to achieving something, and they'll be better off at the end of those 12 weeks. They don't just buy it because they buy it. They're buying it because they see that that process achieves things for them. So all you're doing is mapping your process against mini wins that they're going to have along the way to the big win. So this is what you need to actually construct an offer. And you can put this down on a piece of paper. You don't need a big web page or a big brochure. It could be a one-page document that says literally, do you have this problem? I can help you do this outcome. This is the milestones of how I'm going to do it. This is what it looks like as a process, and this is the price. It can be very, very simple. Make a note of that. Problem, outcome, milestones, process, price. It can be that simple. Because then people go, oh, I've got that problem. I want that outcome. You've got these stages to do it. That's how you operate it, the detail, the mechanics of how you work. Is it a course, a 12-week coaching? Is it a strategy session? Whatever it is, and the price. That is a sellable offer. A 12-week coaching program, if you lead with a 12-week coaching program, and that's the title, and you sell the process, people will not join it up to the problem or the outcome. You're asking them to do it, so you have to lead with those first. So the package, what you're doing is putting your expertise into a container that is easy for people to understand, easy for people to see the value, so that then they can go yes or no. The more ambiguous you make it, poorly defined problem, poorly defined outcome, poorly defined process, or you lead with process, the bigger your marketing and sales skill has to be, the more important that is. And this is why I often talk about making your value obvious. It's because the more ambiguous it is, the more it's open to interpretation, the more you have to market and sell it. And many experts tell me all the time they do not want to be a full-time marketer or salesperson. So clearly defined problem, clearly defined outcome, process and the milestones that achieves, and the price are what you need to make a sellable offer. How do you know that offer, how do you sense check that offer? Well, go to forums online, go and look at your competitors and see if they are offering similar solutions. It does not matter. That you're doing the same thing as somebody else, because your way will be different from their way. And we'll look at that in future episodes. How do you deal with and operate in and stay competitive and still win clients in a competitive environment? But the first stage of being competitive is actually having an offer people can grab hold of and understand and can make a decision. So those kind of 5 things, including the price, are really important. Do not think that a cheaper price makes it easier to sell, because humans are wired to believe that something expensive must be better and something cheaper must be worse. So do not think about pricing as being a way to make it easier. It really isn't. In fact, I'd argue higher pricing makes it easier than lower pricing. So we've got that kind of one-page offer. Problem, outcome, process and milestones and price. We've got that. Brilliant. Now we need a means to market and acquire leads. Sellable offer only works if you've got flow. And I call flow is I've got a flow of leads, so I can move those leads into discovery calls or appointments. I can move them from appointments into firm proposals where I'm presenting my offer, and I've got deals coming out the other side. LAPD, as I call it. So you need that flow. This is where now you have to think about social media, LinkedIn, as your means to market. You approach it with an offer. You don't just go on there, show who you are, and hopefully people will pick it up. I've got an offer. Now my presence and my activity is to create demand for that offer. That's why I'm there. So that means now aligning your profile, aligning your content, aligning your outreach, every bit of the process to pull people into that offer. So there's 3 fundamental parts of using social media to acquire leads and clients. The first part is the awareness piece. People don't buy from people they don't know. It's what always surprises me how many coaches will hire marketing agencies to just churn out messages. And it's like, you're selling something that requires trust in your expertise, and you're approaching it from the lowest trust method ever. So trust building comes in there. So we got awareness, trust building, and then you need that whole conversion system. So think about it. How am I going to build awareness? How am I going to build trust? How am I going to convert? Okay, so awareness is about you being present, sharing your stories, being visible. That's about showing your face, number one. It's about being present on the platform, consistency, so people know who you are. People don't just pick it up from one post every blue moon. People need to see you 7 to 15 times to remember who you are. They need to see your offer 17 to 15 times to actually think about buying it. So don't think about it as a one-hit wonder. So awareness is about being sticky and present and visible. And as you do that awareness, you've got to build trust. How do you build trust? First, show your success, what you've helped other people do. Testimonials, case studies, stories from your experience. Show you understand the problem and the desired outcome that your audience want by sharing relevant content. Yeah, fundamental. That all helps build that trust. Another great type of content that helps you build trust is educational content. People think that educational content will bring you leads. It really doesn't. It does build trust and confidence that you know what you're doing. People can go, wow, I can use that. I can do that. That was really helpful. It does build trust. So you've got awareness and trust. Now you need the conversion. So this is where you need a process to take people down. And I always encourage many experts, because they don't want to be living on social media, living on LinkedIn, that what they need to be doing is building systems that require low time commitment. Because very often, as an expert, you've got a lot of client work to do. You've got a lot of stuff going on. You don't have the bandwidth to do lots and lots of marketing. So you need something that realistically works. So I always talk about newsletters and webinars and events. There are 3 other paths, but these are the 2 big ones for experts. Newsletter, because you've got people in your ecosystem and you can work away nurturing them over time. So building that flow is about bringing people into an ecosystem that you can control, and newsletters and email lists are a big one for that. Growing an email list is critical. So yes, social media can be useful, but social media in your context is to build your email list or newsletter. Now, events, I talk about them a lot, recommend them a lot for experts. It allows you to actually do what you do best. People see your expertise in action. When you're at an event and you're talking about the challenges that your target audience face, they can see and pick up on quite quickly whether you're just talking out lines and you're churning out your well-rehearsed presentation, or you're actually an expert in your field. They can pick it up on just how you approach it. And so getting 100 or so people from LinkedIn, which is easy for most people, and message me on LinkedIn if you want to know more about that. It's easy if you get 100 people. You get 100 people who are all coming because of the same problem or outcome. And they're all your target persona. Easy to do on LinkedIn. Great. Now I have got to deliver that event. And this is where, and we'll not have time for it for today, but there's 2 types of content that you can do in webinars and events. How content and why content. And this works in posting too. How content, people build massive trust in you, huge trust, but they go away from the webinar like they've had an amazing meal and they now need to go and work it off. In other words, you give them so much practical advice, they go away and try and do it. Why content actually unlocks their motivation to pursue the how. And this is really important. So the how content drives them to go and do things. In other words, you've just given them inspo and now they're going to go off and have a go themselves, which is kind of self-defeating for an expert if you've just inspired them to go and do it themselves. Why content actually gets them hooked on wanting to do it. So they see the power of achieving their goal. They see why it matters. And the why content unlocks the how. And your audience then goes, okay, I want to do this. How do I do this? And that's where you get the conversations. So how content drives them to take action and builds trust, why content actually helps them see more clearly why this all matters, sees the importance of it, and motivates them to want to take the next step. And so very often we get this confused, a bit like the educational content, where we think that if we show lots and lots of value, they will buy. In fact, what happens when we show lots and lots of value, we start fixing the problem. When reality is, as an expert, the first thing we need to do is help them understand the problem more detailed in a more clear way so that then they can move forward. So if you want to build that sellable offer, there are two approaches. You make it easy to buy, which means packaging it based on problems and specific problems, specific outcomes, process and milestone. If you don't do that, you will have to massively increase your marketing and sales effort because you will have to educate people more to help them see how your offer makes a difference. In other words, if you lead with process, if you lead with I sell coaching, I sell consulting, if you lead with lots of different problems bundled into a category, you make it very, very difficult for people to figure it out. And so your marketing effort and your sales effort has to go into overdrive. And this is where many coaches, experts, consultants, etc., really fall down because they go down this route not realizing they're going to have to learn sales and marketing skills to a level that they, in honesty, prepared to and don't want to learn. So if you don't want to do that, you need to package your offer around a specific problem, specific outcome, milestones, and process. Now, before I wrap up and leave you to think about this, I just want to give you one more bit of advice here. When you've got a lot of experience, and I feel this all the time, and you'll feel it too, I inherently want to help people. And so when I see that I could help people with, sales, and I can help people with marketing, and I can help IT people and marketing people and small business owners, when I see that I can help all of these people, and I see the size of the opportunity, I struggle massively putting myself into this box. I struggle, and you'll struggle, with staying in that box, that package you've built, for two reasons. One, it will feel like I'm closing myself off to opportunity. And it's true, you are. You are. But what you are doing is making it easier to capture or to close opportunity that's aligned with that offer, that box you've built. In other words, yes, literally, you are now saying, I'm only for this box, this package. This is all I've got. And I'm going to the world with this. And it does feel like you are closing doors. But what you're actually doing is opening one door fully. And I talk about this a lot because it's so important. Of Coca-Cola made their money with a medical drink. Yeah, I know it had cocaine in it and all that kind of stuff at the time, but it was a medical drink. That's how they built their viable first stage of their business. The viable bit. The bit that allowed them to employ people, make a profit, and scale a bit. So they cornered a little segment of the market. People who had a problem, but it was a corner of the market, a tiny corner of the market, and they dominated and owned that little piece. As they made a profit, as they started to be successful, they had more resources. They had more manpower. They had a deeper understanding of the market. They had stability. They had predictability in sales. They had all of these foundations in place in that one tiny slither of the market. And then, because they had built out that little fortress, they could afford to expand out. They could employ people, get extra resource to go, let's take on this segment of the market now, this segment of the market. And if you think about it, Red Bull, which is now a global brand, did exactly the same thing. They couldn't compete with Coca-Cola. So they took on a small segment of the market where they could beat Coca-Cola, and that was the extreme sports. So they decided we'll go all in on the extreme sports market and really own it. Now, I am sure, and this is where we need to think differently because I know I struggle with this too. It's a mindset thing. My mindset is I can help lots of people, and I don't want to close myself off to helping lots of people, lots of different problems. I know I could help all of those people. But if I'm starting out, I don't have the resources to compete with the whole market. I don't have the resources to take on and outmaneuver some people who have got more resources, more everything than me. But I can own a little square of the internet, a little square of LinkedIn, a little segment of LinkedIn, and I can dominate that. I can play to the underdog and go, right, I'm going to dominate this little territory here. Logically, I understand that. But I also, with my emotions and my other side, struggle with that. And that fight, sometimes between the logic, the business sense, and the personal feelings, the emotions of it, go to war with each other for too long. And they go to war with each other for too long, and you end up actually stuck in limbo for years. I know, because I've done this, right? You're stuck in limbo for years where you're not quite speaking to anybody because your message can't land, because you're trying to hedge against losing out to some losing opportunity. The real power for you is in this box that might feel like a curse. It might feel like you are dumbing yourself down. It might feel like you're making yourself one-dimensional. It might feel like you're doing yourself a disservice to your knowledge and expertise, but you can own a slice of a space. And this is the way you have to think about it. I am building in this slice, this little corner of the internet, this little corner of LinkedIn, so that I can get stability, predictability, and profitability to take on the rest. That's how you have to think about it. Take this slice, own it, literally dominate it, become the go-to in that little slice, and then with the profit from that, take on the rest. If you build an offer, there's two ways to do it. You try and take the whole market and you will get lost. You will get eaten for breakfast. You build an offer for a slice of the market, own that piece, become profitable and take on the rest. That's how it works. So, sellable offer, just to wrap up, said it enough times, but I want to drive it home. You need one specific problem, one solution to solve it, break it down into a process and break it down into milestones and give it a price. Put that on one sheet of paper. You've got a viable offer. Get it out to the market, whether that be a newsletter, LinkedIn events, loads of different ways to do it. We can talk about those in another episode, but you need to do that. It'll make your life easier. You didn't start building an expert business because you wanted to be a full-time social media user, LinkedIn user, God knows what. You did it because you wanted to use your expertise and use your knowledge and use your know-how to help people. And that's what you should be doing. So make it easy for yourself. Make it easy for you to help people build a sellable offer.